Hi there, hi, my name's Charlie. I'm a private hire driver. I've been driving now for crikey nearly 20 years, and for the last 3 years I've been driving an EV. Okay, so I got into an EV basically when the congestion charge was coming into London. TfL announced that private hire drivers had to pay the congestion charge, which meant more cost for me. So I looked at options. The only way I could avoid it at the time was to get into an EV. So it was sort of financially led initially, but obviously now I'm a green warrior. So I think savings-wise, from driving an EV, best way of saying it, certainly with fuel costs, I'm probably spending 25% what I spent on diesel or petrol. That equates nowadays with a fuel costs. I'm probably spending about 50 quid a week on charging, which is pretty good compared that I would have been equated to say 150, 200 pounds on diesel. So yeah, quite a lot saving.
Charging my car, I'm lucky enough to have a driveway, and I used to until all the variable costs with electricity on domestic, well, anywhere actually. I used to charge on my driveway. I've stopped doing that now. I now charge on lampposts locally, so I've got 4 near me. I've yet to have any issues finding one. There's always one available to me, and I'm paying about 24 pence a kilowatt there, so a lot more than I used to pay. I think initially when I started it was about 13 pence a kilowatt, but even at those costs, like I say, I've gone from probably about 35 quid a week up to say 50 quid a week now on electricity.
What do I like most about driving an EV? I think, how long have you got? They're good fun. I think that's the first thing to say. I mean, not only are they cheap, economical to run, they're great, as a business for a private hire driver. I mean, it's the only vehicle you should be driving. But they're just fun to drive. They're quick, they're nippy, they look like they're from the future. They're great. There's not much else I could say really. Just get in one. If you haven't been in one, test drive one, because they really are good fun. Passengers love driving in an EV. I think from their perspective, it's relatively new, it's got a novel experience for them. So they're fun. They realise that they're quite modern, they're very functional, there's lots of bells and whistles and things. But I think, it's quite a novelty for most passengers to get in now. I mean, that will change obviously over the next year or so. But at the moment, it's got an experience and enjoying that, and that obviously gets reflected in tips, which we like. So, is there anything I miss about diesel or petrol? No, I would never go back. It would seem like going back to Victorian ages if I did something like that. You might as well get a horse and carriage. They're just dirty, smelly, not much fun to drive. Certainly on a private hire level, if you're driving a Lamborghini every day, then maybe that's a bit more fun. But for what we do for a living, pointless being in a diesel.
Okay, longest ride I've ever done. Not that far really. I went to Southend, out to Leigh-on-Sea. Nice little run. I think it's about 50 miles away. So, with a range of 280, it's not an issue. But I got there, it was great. Some fish and chips when I got there, and charged the car up and came back. Not that I needed to charge the car. But anecdotally, a friend of mine who's a private hire driver, he's Bulgarian. He drove back to Bulgaria in his EV, drove right across Europe, just using obviously charge points en route, and no issues whatsoever. Had a great run, did it very easy. So so I think that's the longest trip I've heard of, and obviously and it worked. It was a functioning trip.
As a ride-hailing driver, would I use an EV? Yes. It's the future. Why wouldn't you? I mean, just the cost savings that a ride-hailing driver makes would obviously be exactly the same for a domestic user. So if you're filling the car up once a week for 90 quid, you're going to be doing that for a lot less, so 25 quid maybe for electricity. So the savings are there for everyone. But yes, I would drive an EV personally. They're great fun. They're good fun. Great family cars too.
I think we're kind of there on the minimum, I'd say, at the moment. Most vehicles now are doing 250, 280. I would say that's pretty much it. I'm very happy doing that. I do no more than 100, 120 miles a day. So that's 2 days for me for a full charge. Depends where you live, of course. If you live out in Essex or Surrey, or out on the borders, you've got a long drive into London, then maybe 280 is not enough for you, but they're coming. So I think the last time I spoke to the sales guy at Kia, he mentioned to me their sweet spot they're looking for is 400 to 500 miles. So if they're looking for it, they'll probably find it.
I'd say yes. I think, of course, they will, because if you're not electric at that point, you won't be driving on the Uber platform. So every driver on Uber will be electric. I think it's a goal. It's an achievable goal, and I think most drivers looking to change their vehicles now are looking for EV, and they appreciate that. That if they want to drive in and around London, they've got to be in an EV. So we've got 3 years. I think that's long enough. I think we'll see an incremental rise in EV use over the next couple of years, where it'll become an unusual thing. As a rider, if someone turned up in a diesel, you might reject it. You might say, "I don't want it. I want an EV." Because I think, people's thought processes now, they're thinking in a greener way. They're not going to want you if you're a diesel. You need to be in an EV.
So, servicing and maintaining an EV. Personally, I rent this, so it's not something I have to worry about. But I do have friends who own their EVs and they pay for servicing stuff. So, I think from what I can gather, and it just makes perfect sense, if you think of it in terms of what's there to go wrong in an EV, there's no gearbox, there's no injectors, there's no DPF filter, there's no pistons, there's nothing, no dry, there's no. It's just nothing to go wrong. There's no exhaust. So you've got a motor and a battery, both of which are warranted. So from what I can gather, a service, it pretty much they plug it in, they reprogram it, they check your tyres and brakes, and they replace all your fluids. I'm sure there's more to it than that I have missed, but I would say on the whole, the money you're saving in the long term, if you think of it in terms of all those things that cost you £2,000 when you're off-road, the gearbox is gone. You've got to wait for another gearbox to come in from France, and you're off the road for 2 weeks. You can't earn any money. That will never happen in this car. It just won't go wrong. Simple as that. So much cheaper for maintenance in these cars.
Driving an EV, I think, on a personal level, it's been a journey. I mean, obviously, early on, especially, I took it. I was an early uptake 3 years ago. I started with EV. The network wasn't out there really then. The charging network was pretty limited. There weren't many other drivers to get information from. So it was a tough ride for me, to be honest. I had a couple of scary moments where I almost ran out of charge. That will never happen again. I think, for drivers now are looking to get into EV, there are so many resources available to you. People like myself, WeFlex, Uber, all these platforms that have so many information streams that you can just find out, you hit the ground running basically, get your EV and you're off and running. Add into that, the charging network is just so good now. There are issues, of course there are, like anything, you may turn up at a charge and there's someone else on it. But you work around it, and you think differently than when you had petrol or diesel. You're not thinking, well, I'll run it down to vapors and hit a garage. You pass a charger, you've got a bit of time, plug it in for 10 minutes. Why not? It's not going to hurt you. So I think that probably covers all bases. I mean, it is a different thought process, and it is scary, when you're thinking of, changing from something you've been used to all your life, and then all of a sudden you're expecting to drive a bumper car around for the rest of your life. And it's all I can say is test drive one, you'll love it. And once you speak to enough people, you'll realise it's the best decision you've ever made.